Me. Dear God, I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you've given us. Thank you for the gift of the empty tomb. And God, I ask that you come into this place and you help me to preach. If I've written down anything that's actually worth listening to, God, open their ears, open their hearts to receive your word. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts, may that be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Once upon a time, an alcoholic became a believer. He turned away from his excessive drinking and he turned to a life of following Jesus. Now, his old drinking buddies made fun of him a lot. They asked him, how can you possibly believe all that nonsense in the Bible? I mean, what about miracles? I mean, you're a smart guy. You know better than that. The man chuckled and he laughed along with them for a while, but they pushed on him. And they said, well, I mean, come on, you don't really believe that Jesus turned water into wine, do you? The man paused for a moment and he thought about it and he said, I do. I know that Jesus can turn water into wine because in my house he turned whiskey into furniture. I want to begin this morning by asking you a very simple question. Do you believe in miracles? Yeah? Maybe. Probably. Probably not. I mean, maybe it is a miracle, but it seems unlikely with all the advancements in medical and technological advancements in our culture. It seems a little silly to believe in something so ridiculous as the supernatural or the divine. I mean, we are too smart to believe in miracles, right? The modern man understands the world. I know too much to believe that there could be something more. You all are so well trained. You guys know this stuff, and yet I look back over history and I realize that every great breakthrough that humanity has ever had comes from someone who was willing to defy the accepted notions of medical or technological advancement. Every great invention came from someone who was surrounded by people who told them it is not possible. The world is flat. If you sail over that ocean, you will fall off the end and die. That's what the scientists are telling me. A human being cannot fly in the air like a bird. If your machine is heavier than the air, it cannot be up in the air. That's what scientists are telling me. And my favorite one, lots of examples, but my favorite one is if I had a time machine, I would love to take a smartphone back to the 1800s and just blow their minds with all the stuff we can do. The more I think about it, the more I realize that scientific discovery should increase our belief in the unknown, not decrease it. At every stage of history, we have learned more about our world, and yet somehow we have convinced ourselves at every stage that we know everything, that there's nothing more for us to learn, that it's impossible, that there could be more. Perhaps, maybe, just maybe, science is a tool for discovery and not a system that's supposed to put limitations on our imagination. You don't have to throw away science in order to believe in the divine. Quite the opposite. And so I ask you, and you guys know the answer, do you believe in miracles? Today is the first sermon in a brand new sermon series called Breaking Barriers, the Miracles of Jesus. For the month of April, we're going to be looking, every week in April, we're going to take an in-depth look at the miracles Jesus performed and what they can teach us about the God that is actually out there. And what we will discover is that God has a habit of breaking barriers. He has a habit of tearing down walls. We humans, we love to throw up rules. We love to throw up systems in place to explain our world. It makes us feel better. It makes us feel like we are in control of the universe around us. But in order to help us grow, every now and then God has to tear down the barriers around us, to break the rules, to show us something better. And so today I want to talk about the freedom that comes when God tears down the walls in your life. And so we get started in Mark chapter 4, where it says, "On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, 'Let us go across to the other side.' And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with them." And so Jesus is with his disciples, and after a long day of teaching to the crowds, and he's decided, you know what, let's hop in the boat, and let's go out over the sea. Let's cross across to the other side of the sea. And so it says in verse 37, "And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him, and they said, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' And he awoke, and he rebuked the wind, and he said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, 'Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?'" I like to imagine Jesus waking up from his nap. Maybe he was a little grumpy, maybe a little bedhead, a little disheveled, and he kind of waves his arms and he rebukes the wind maybe like a teenager going after the alarm clock. "Peace, be still, knock it off. Shush. Peace, be still." Now think about that. I mean, that would be the rantings of a crazy person. He's talking to the wind, except that it works. And the wind immediately dies down, and the waves become calm. And then he turns to the disciples and he says, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And I love that word "still" in that sentence. Have you still no faith? Because what that shows us is that this is not the first time Jesus has done something amazing in front of the disciples. It's like he's saying to them, "How are you not getting this? Jesus, we're going to be fine," right? Like verse 41, it freaks them out. They are so afraid. It says they were filled with great fear. And they said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Who is this guy?" But I guess that's the question, isn't it? And so we fast forward from chapter 4 all the way up to chapter 16, which is the last chapter of Mark, which is, of course, the resurrection story. It says in chapter 16, verse 2, "And very early, on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, 'Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?'" And so Sunday morning comes around, you got 3 women headed to the tomb. Now their plan is to put some spices on a dead body. That's all they're expecting. And they're wondering to each other, their greatest concern is, hey, how are we going to get in there? There's this huge rock that they rolled in front of the stone. How are we going to be able, we're not going to be, there's only 3 of us. How can we move this giant stone that's in front of the tomb? We're not going to be able to get inside. The Bible makes it very clear, nobody thought the resurrection was going to happen. Nobody believed that that was possible. But it continues in verse 4. "And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, 'Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen, and he is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you.'" Just as he told you. One thing we forget is that Jesus told the disciples he was going to die and come back. He told them 3 times, "I'm going to die and come back. I'm going to leave for a while and come back." And they still cannot wrap their head around who Jesus is. Have you still no faith? And then in verse 8, it says, "They went out and they fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." So they run away trembling, but I guess it shakes the world a little bit to witness something that expands your definition of what is possible. Everyone assumed that death was the end of the story. Think about what they were saying just a few days ago on Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday when he gets arrested and they drag him in front of the chief priests and they're accusing him of claiming to be the Son of God. And they're like, Jesus, save yourself, refute the claims, deny the claims. And then when they're whipping him and beating him and making him carry the cross, Jesus, save yourself. It's not too late, save yourself. And even when he's up on the cross, the guy next to him on the next cross is saying, come on, man. You're the Son of God. Save yourself. Get down off that cross. Save yourself before it's too late. Everyone assumed that death was the end of the story before it's too late. They assumed Jesus can only save himself before he dies. Because after death, it's too late. Death is always the end of the story. They viewed death as this immovable wall. There's no way to do anything after death. Death is always the end of the story. It will be too late if he goes all the way to being dead. But then Jesus Christ went all the way to being dead. And then he waited 3 more days. And then he rose. By waiting 3 days and coming back, Jesus shows his real power. You see, his real focus was not trying to convince people. His real focus was not trying to save himself from death. He was trying to overcome death, to go through that and then conquer. God overcame death on that day all those years ago, showing humanity that his authority over the earth is complete, from calming the wind and the waves all the way to death itself. God has authority over everything. Now, verse 8 says that they didn't tell anyone, but eventually word gets out. Jesus starts appearing to people, like Mary in the garden, and she thinks he's the gardener, and he appears to Mary Magdalene, and the story begins to spread. But the response is pretty predictable. I mean, if you found out somebody had died on Friday, and then on Sunday people were claiming he was alive, what would you do? It says in verse 11, but when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe it. Again, verse 13, and they went back and told the rest, but they did not believe them. Nobody believed that Jesus had actually done it, that Jesus actually rose from the dead. A lot of times when I talk to people, like maybe non-Christians or agnostics, about God and faith and miracles and that kind of stuff, they always have the same response. You know, if you could just prove it to me, I would believe. If I had any evidence, if you could just prove God's existence, then I would believe. But I'm looking at this story, and these guys had evidence. They had all the evidence they could use, and they still could not wrap their head around who Jesus was. In fact, Jesus himself has to come back and scold the disciples for their lack of belief. In verse 14, Jesus shows up, and he says, afterward, he appeared to the 11 themselves as they were reclining at table. And he rebuked them for their unbelief and the hardness of heart, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. You can feel his frustration, right? He comes back. He has to rebuke them for their lack of belief. You know, it's like, what do I have to do to convince you of who I am? Have you still no faith? Have you still no faith? See, what we see in the scripture this morning is that God turns our walls into a way. God takes our assumptions, our obstacles, our immovable restraints that we can't do anything about, and he turns that into a path for freedom, a way of salvation. He takes Jesus' death and he uses that as a way to give us life. Think about this. We all have walls in our lives. We all have obstacles that we have built up in front of us, limitations on what we believe is possible. There are things that hold us back in life. But here's the thing. We built those walls. We put those limitations in place. We are the ones holding ourselves back. And so let me ask you, what are the bricks in your wall? In your life today, what are the bricks? What are the pieces that you put in place to keep you from living the way that God would have you live? Oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. I have too many health concerns. I can't do it. I don't have enough money. I can't do it. I'm too busy. I can't do it. I'm just a kid. Or I'm just a woman. I'm just one person. I'm not smart enough. I'm not charming enough. I can't. We tell ourselves over and over that miracles are not possible. And we take those bricks and we place them in front of ourselves. It's not possible. I can't. We tell ourselves, we wall ourselves in. We put the leash on our own neck. Miracles are not possible. And yet, I remember a time when they said that you can't have a female lead in a superhero movie. Doesn't work. Can't be done. Female superheroes are never as successful. Those movies are not as good. And you certainly can't have a woman director. Can we move to the next slide? Sorry, out of the blue. There we go. The highest grossing superhero origin story of all time. Highest grossing superhero movie in the DC Extended Universe and highest grossing movie overall of last summer. All right, but she's white, right? Okay, we can accept a pretty white girl, but what about black people? You can't have a successful black superhero. It just doesn't work. They tried it with Will Smith. It didn't work. You can't have black superhero films. They're always going to make less money, especially if it's a black director. Can we move to the next slide? Highest rated superhero movie of all time, knocking out the previous first place, which was The Incredibles. 97% approval ratings, and at over $1 billion and counting, it is the highest. It has brought in more money than any other solo superhero movie ever. Cannot be done. And yet, have you still no faith? All right. Those are superhero movies, right? I mean, who cares about that? That's not real. I mean, that's not an accurate reflection of sexism and racism in our culture. No. So what about the real world? We can move to the next slide. Well, I remember a time when we used to look at wealthy executives and politicians and we would watch them abuse their power to hurt the women around them, and they would get away with it over and over and over. I'm 29 years old, and I actually remember a time when I was told, it's just the way the world is. There's nothing we can do about it. There's always going to be a few bad eggs who abuse their power, and we can't stop them. There's nothing we can do. Men treating women poorly, that's a part of the culture. That's just a part of the system that we have in our lives. Inequality is the expectation. We can't do anything about it, and so we brush it under the rug. And then often we find a way to blame the victims by saying something like, I don't know, maybe it's what she was wearing or something like that. And then in October of 2017, the Me Too movement began. And it brought down people that we thought were invincible. It cannot be done, and yet we did it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way the world is. And yet, here we are, reshaping the world to make it a safer place for women. Have you still no faith? What I'm trying to show you this morning is that we are told over and over and over that it cannot be done, that it is impossible. And when we believe them, we put one more brick in front of us in the wall that holds us back. Now, all of those examples are from the last 12 months. And I got a lot more examples, but, do you see what I'm trying to show you? We are living in the age of miracles. All right, this is not stuff that happened thousands of years ago, maybe. Have you still no faith? God turns our walls into a way. Think for a second this morning. What would the resurrection of Jesus Christ mean in your life? What would it mean for you and the things that you are going through? What would it look like to tear down your walls? To believe that whatever your obstacles are, to believe that there is a way. There's an old saying, and it says, whether you believe you can overcome or not, you will always be right. If you believe that you cannot overcome, you're right. But if you believe that you can, you are right. I guess what I'm trying to point out is that there is a psychological benefit to believing in miracles. The empty tomb opens up a world of possibilities in our lives. Faith has an incredible benefit for those who believe, for those who try. If you believe, then you can overcome. Now, I am not saying it's going to be easy. I am not saying you're going to get it done on the first try. Sometimes it takes a lifetime of work and then some. But what I am saying is that there is a God out there who has a habit of turning our walls into a way. And so here's what I want you to do with that this morning. I want you to let the resurrection of Jesus Christ rip a hole in the walls of your life. I want you to let the good news of Jesus' resurrection, whatever's holding you back, whatever obstacle you cannot climb over, roll away the stone. I want you to roll away the stone. Think about the bricks in your wall. What's going on in your life? What are the obstacles you cannot overcome? Drugs, broken relationships, troublesome kids, troublesome parents, trouble at school, bullying, financial troubles, addictions, national and local controversies, family drama. Ooh, let me say that one again. Family drama. And one more time, family drama. Pastor JJ, I cannot heal my marriage. It's impossible. Pastor JJ, I cannot connect with my teenager. It is impossible. You can't connect to teenagers. Pastor JJ, there's nothing we can do about the inherent institutionalized racism and sexism in our culture. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing we can do about the teen suicide epidemic in our county. There's nothing we can do about the opioid crisis in our backyard. There's nothing I can do. It's impossible. And yet, we are here this morning to celebrate a God who rolls away the stone, who smashes a hole in the wall and overcomes what is supposed to be impossible. So this morning, take a second and let the resurrection of Jesus Christ rip a hole in the walls of your life. Because once you believe that there is a God who can overcome death, everything else is easy. When you believe that he is loving you and supporting you and giving you a second chance, then you get to start tearing down the walls in your life, brick by brick. Give those bricks to God and watch the walls come crumbling down. Do you believe in miracles? Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came down to earth all those years ago to break barriers, to show us that the limitations of the world are just that, limitations of the world. They are not limitations on our God. And so I'll leave you with this. May you let the resurrection of Jesus Christ rip a hole in the walls of your life. Let it give you hope that another way is possible. And then may you climb through that wall, climb out of the box and into the light of God's glory. Go do something impossible today. Amen.